There are 4 themes that have recurrently appeared that are helpful to making sense of the experience and the narrative that is produced. These 4 are around history, locality, religion, and time. History matters. I think that's what our data richly portrays, that the histories of migration, the histories of family life, the histories of kinship, the histories of previous migration and settlement, this intergenerational experience is richly portrayed in terms of the allegiance, in terms of the understanding of movement, in terms of the expectations of welcome, in terms of the understandings of difference and the understandings of affinity. These are all richly understood in terms of the history of a people, of a family, of a kinship group, the history of a context, the history of a camp, the history of a country. And that, I think, plays in importantly, I'll discuss it a little bit more later, but about the idea of the locality and localization, that an appreciation of those local dynamics, not just of labour markets and economics, but also in terms of the place and people and deportment and norms and culture. It's that theatre in which hosting and refugeedom is played out. The third area that particularly emerges from me from the findings and thinking about potential policy implications is around religion mattering, religious sentiment, religious obligation, religious principle, religious commitment, about, again, issues of behavior, of dress, of reciprocity, of irritation or acceptance. Religion has a very big part in shaping the everyday worlds of hosting and of exile. And we found in our research, sometimes that's on the surface, sometimes that's very obvious in terms of its determining factors and its influence. Other times there was a level of trust, a level of time that needed to be engaged with communities or with individuals before the power and the influence of religious affiliation, religious obligation came into play. So we've, I think, been confirmed in our understanding that understanding the religious landscape matters, but also been made aware that it takes some time to really begin to understand the way that those religious dynamics operate in a particular locality. And finally is an awareness that time matters, that there is really a sense that there is a period in which the experience of refugees and hosts might be one thing, and then over months and years it transitions into another state. And the most typical form of pattern that we see in the data is largely one of a strong welcome and an expectation of support early in the refugee crisis from Syria. But over time, there being dynamics and forces which were more difficult to manage and so forth. So there is a welcome and there is a place for that and a time for that. But that also we understand that over time, there are processes that change. And this links a little bit into the history idea that I mentioned earlier on, but I think it's more narrowly within time that we see that an interview in 1 year and an interview in the next year sees that within these localities, there is a timeline for the dynamics of settlement. And sometimes it may be a greater integration, a greater resolution, a consolidation of a community, and other times it may be increasing tensions within that community. But it's very clear from our data that there is a dynamic over time that shapes the experiences of refugees and of their hosts. Our findings have a number of implications for policymakers and for practitioners. And I particularly want to link it to this notion that I mentioned earlier about history mattering, locality mattering, religion mattering, and time mattering. And if all those things matter in terms of the experience of refugees and their hosts, they also matter to humanitarian response and the way that that could be coordinated, orchestrated, supported. And that challenge that it has then for humanitarian coordination, I think, is really a quite different one. Let me just start with locality. That if there are resources within a locality which are particularly influential on the experience of refugees and the network of resources that are available to them, we begin to move, as the localization agenda would encourage us to be shifting our lens from how to get international or national resources into that community. What I've sometimes seen as humanitarian coordinator as the traffic cop, sort of directing traffic into a community, to one that is much more attuned to the resources that are already available within that community or are transmitted and shared throughout that community. And that might be directly in the community, or it might be through resources coming from the Gulf, or it might be coming from the mosque, or it might be coming from a local NGO, or it might be coming from a few households that are offering hospitality. And if that's where the key focus of hosting is happening, in that interchange of resources within localities, rather than necessarily or exclusively in major flows through international and national coordination, then the humanitarian coordinator needs skills of triage and dialogue with those community resources. It's a much more contextual, dialogic task, a triage task almost, of trying to work out what are the most available, appropriate resources, how to link those with needs and so forth. And I think that requires a really major, if we're serious at all about the localization agenda, and there are qualms in some corners to see if really donors are serious in that. But if we are serious in promoting that agenda, then I think our data supports the notion that the coordination of humanitarian support has to shift from being one that's predominantly a valve or a control mechanism for international aid flowing into a country, from one that's much, much more sensitive to the resources and the agendas and the dynamics within local communities. And then I would layer that with who understands the history of that community, who understands, has religious literacy and can engage with religious actors in that community, who understands how things have changed over time, and so therefore isn't an appointment for 3 months or 6 months or 9 months, and continue having to relearn those things, but is an embedded resource for humanitarian coordination over a period of years, certainly, a 1 year, 2 year period of time. And it's very clear in our data that there was a sense that when our researchers are in Jerash or in Irbid, they're seen as foreigners, or they're seen as, oh, if you're involved with humanitarians, are you one of those people who come from Amman? You're seen as separate. The way of working is an arm's length one, which is largely divorced from the routines and the realities of the streets and of the markets and of the life of those localities. But I think it's quite a powerful trend within our data that we see that there is an elite, there is both a national elite as well as an international elite that is running humanitarian assistance, that is geographically, conceptually, economically divorced from the key resources, the key actors that are supporting refugees and are involved in hosting locally. And that makes no sense if we want to bring together those elements of humanitarian response. So I think the implications of the role of history, locality, time, religion, is to understand that we do need to embed our coordination capacities, our skills, but also our locations and ways of working much closer to those communities so that we can genuinely connect with them and supplement and support them in delivery rather than ignore them and develop parallel structures.